On today's episode of Locked On Oilers, would Jakob Chychrun help the Edmonton Oilers? We will talk about that and much more on today's episode of Locked On Oilers.
You're Locked On Oilers, your daily podcast on the Edmonton Oilers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to the Locked On Oilers podcast. I'm your host and former Oilers game day producer, Brett Holden. As my good friend Tony Brar would say, happy Friday, everybody. We're finally at the end of the week, and as mentioned on today's episode, we're going to be talking about Jakob Chychrun. Now, I know yesterday's episode was all about why the Edmonton Oilers don't need another defenseman. Well, we haven't had a move or really on-ice news from the Edmonton Oilers recently, so we're back with the fun and we're back with the speculation. But some people put in the comments recently whether or not Jakob Chychrun would help the Edmonton Oilers. So let's talk about that on today's episode of Locked On Oilers. Thank you so much for making Locked On Oilers your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you find your podcast. Yes, we're going to start off with Jakob Chychrun and just what Jakob Chychrun brings to a team. Then we will go into what a potential trade for Jakob Chychrun would look like. And then to end off the week, we're going to look at our predictions from the, basically this week and how far off we were. And then we will also take a look at predictions for next week, as I'm sure they are going to be just as accurate as it was this week. But yes, let's get into Jakob Chychrun. As a lot of people know, Jakob Chychrun, a very high draft pick. A lot of people wanted Jakob Chychrun in his draft year. And now a lot of people want Jakob Chychrun again. He is now available once again. I mean, a lot of people thought he was going to get moved last season, and then he got injured, was out for the rest of the year, and basically left it for an off-season decision. While we're in the midst of the offseason and still no movement yet from Jakob Chychrun or the camp. So would Edmonton be a solid option for them? It seems like the Oilers are in the midst or bound to make another big-ish move for the Edmonton Oilers. It sounds like the Edmonton Oilers could have a different roster that they still have right now going into the opening day. So, how would Jakob Chychrun add to the Edmonton Oilers? Well, last season in the 47 games that he did play before his injury, 7 goals, 14 assists, good for 21 points last season. Now, the season before, where he got basically an entire season, again, it was shortened because of the COVID year, but he did play 56 games, 18 goals, 23 assists, 41 points. 18 goals for a defenseman is very, very impressive. Very impressive. Again, if you take a look at a guy like Tyson Barrie, who's seen as one of the top offensive defensemen in the league, I'm pretty sure he scored only 7 goals last season. So 7 to the 18 that Jakob Chychrun had last season in 56 games is pretty solid. In his career in 337 games, 53 goals, 89 assists, good for 142 points. Chychrun's obviously an offensive defenseman he can play physical as well. He's a strong defenseman. A big body. I'm pretty sure he's he's from Ontario, played for Sarnia Sting. So he's a good old Canadian boy, but again, I think he would be a very solid add for the Edmonton Oilers, very solid numbers over his career. But the thing is that he's been playing on a very bad Arizona Coyotes. Because I bring that up for my favorite stat of them all, the goals for and goals against per 60 minutes, because I want to compare how Jakob Chychrun would integrate, or how well he would integrate into the Edmonton Oilers, and compare his goals for per 60 minutes and goals against per 60 minutes to what they would be on the Edmonton Oilers now. Well, from last season. And they weren't very impressive. Even the offensive numbers. Goals for per 60 minutes in all situations was a 2.17, which would have been good for 19th on the Edmonton Oilers, above Devon Shore, Ryan McLeod, and Philip Broberg. Not exactly a group of guys you want to be sitting around with, offensively at least, in this type of statistic. And then defensively, goals against per 60 minutes, 3.79 in all situations, which would have been good for 26th. Now the thing about that is, again, in all situations, the goals against and goals for per 60 minutes does get skewed a little bit because of some guys play on the penalty kill, some guys play on the power play, this and that and the other thing. Arizona was also a very bad hockey team. A lot of people like their goaltender, Karel Vejmelka, but again, there's only so much you can do when your team is not very. And that's kind of how I feel with Jakob Chychrun and a lot of these advanced stats. I think will be a little skewed because he was on a bad team, but they still need to be better. At 5-on-5, Jakob Chychrun posted a 2.04 goals for per 60 minutes, which would have been good for 22nd on the Edmonton Oilers, above Brad Malone. Impressive. 5-on-5 goals against per 60 minutes at 5-on-5 was a whopping 3.42, which would have been good for 28th on the Edmonton Oilers. 28th. Yes, 28th. Not quite last, but just about. Then we'll go into his power play numbers and penalty kill numbers. In power play, his goals for per 60 was a 2.12 on the power play. Would be a welcome addition to that very solid Edmonton Oilers power play, wouldn't it? It would have been so welcome, in fact, that he would have sat last on the Edmonton Oilers in goals for per 60 minutes on the power play. Which seems like the Edmonton Oilers power play would get a lot better, if you can't sense my sarcasm. And on the penalty kill, an 8.62 goals against per 60 minutes, which would have been good for 13th. Again, Arizona was not a very good team, so the defensive stats may be a little skewed, but that's still not fantastic. Okay, so with those numbers out of the way, Jakob Chychrun has raw talent. Everybody knows Jakob Chychrun is a very solid defenseman. He's a big defenseman, as I mentioned at the start. Those numbers aren't very favorable, especially for a team who's trying to make a push, to the next round, essentially, because the Edmonton Oilers were at the Western Conference Finals. They just need that extra push to make it to the Stanley Cup Finals. Jakob Chychrun really moved that needle, considering they already have Tyson Barrie, and especially considering that if there is a trade for Jakob Chychrun, it's probably going to be Tyson Barrie or potentially a Tyson Barrie in return. Let's take a look at the trade bait potentially for Jakob Chychrun. Trade bait is kind of similar to Patrick Kane. It would be more of a dump off than anything else. But Tyson Barrie, one of them as well, as mentioned. If you're going to offset a defenseman, I guess you might as well send a defenseman back in return for whatever reason. But Tyson Barrie does hold that $4.5 million cap hit, so that does hinder his ability in Edmonton, I guess, a little bit. Warren Foegele as well, a guy with a $2.75 million cap hit. It could be a guy that Arizona would scoop up and really be useful for them down there. Dimitri Samarukov as well, another guy. I think this would be a solid trade to add him into as well. I've talked about Dimitri Samarukov over the last couple of episodes. I like him a lot. Could be an NHL talent, but I think in a move like this, they would make sense. The other prospect as well, Raphael Lavoie, I would add in this one, second round pick for the Edmonton Oilers, and then 2 first-round picks as well from 2023 and 2024 could also be used as trade bait. So, what would a trade potentially look like looking at those trade bait and potential trade bait for the Edmonton Oilers and the Arizona Coyotes for Jakob Chychrun? Well, we will get to that in just a second, but first, I want to tell you about our partners over at BetOnline. BetOnline.net is the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your betting needs. Find all your favorite sports and events at the #1 online source for odds, lines, and games. Find reviews and news for every league, including Major League Baseball, NFL, and NBA. I almost said MLB again. NHL, they even got combat sports like the UFC, some MMA, esports, and even golf. So much more as well. I was looking at some of the baseball stuff that they have. You can take a look at the lines for like Mexican League Baseball. I'm pretty sure you could probably find like exhibition preseason soccer games as well. Like it is, I haven't checked if they have Canadian Premier League yet, which I should, because shout out FC Edmonton. But I don't know. They have so many random things in there. It's pretty cool. BetOnline continues to be the top online resource for all your sports wagering information, from live in-game betting, scores, and podcasts. They have you covered. Head to the betonline.net today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. BetOnline, where the game starts. Where we are going to continue, as I throw my board and my notes all around, with Jakob Chychrun and what a potential trade could look like for Jakob Chychrun. I have 3 deals here for Jakob Chychrun. Now, I know I just went through the stats for him. Yesterday's episode was about whether or not the Edmonton Oilers need another defenseman. My opinion was that they didn't. But someone mentioned Jakob Chychrun and how he may be integrated into the Oilers. And I said, that's not a bad idea. Let's take a look into it. So, again, as I mentioned, taking a look at those numbers, I was not very impressed. And I don't think, especially with the front office that the Edmonton Oilers have now with Brad Holland, a very analytics-led group, and you saw with their signing so far, I don't think they would be very willing to let go of too much in a trade for Jakob Chychrun, unlike what they would be willing to unload for a guy like Patrick Kane. But here are the 3 proposed trades we have here for Jakob Chychrun. The first one is sending a defenseman in return with Tyson Barrie, or in Tyson Barrie, I should say. So Tyson Barrie to Arizona, as well with a first-round pick in 2023 and a third-round pick in 2024. I believe they still have that pick. If not, then they can use the second-round pick. I forget if they sent the 2024 pick in the previous Coyotes trade, I guess, with the Zach Kassian. But might as well just send off that third-round pick along with them as well. But I think that capital and that return is fair enough. Tyson Barrie and Jakob Chychrun offensively or skill-wise, I guess, kind of bring similar traits, so that would make sense. A guy that basically kind of a contract in, contract out type deal. The first and the third are kind of the sweeteners because you realize that Jakob Chychrun is much younger than Tyson Barrie, and you would get more out of Jakob Chychrun than you would in Tyson Barrie in the long run. So again, that's where those futures and those picks come from. I'm not too pumped, as you will see in the future trades. What are they? Proposals, I guess. I'm not too pumped in adding a prospect and a player and a prospect. And if I do, then it's going to be not necessarily a very high pick. If they do, depending on the player. So that's the first trade proposal I have. The second one is I have a player, prospect, and a pick here, so I just ate my words, but it'll make sense why I have it in a second. I have Warren Foegele, okay, that $2.75 million cap hit, Dimitri Samarukov, and the 2023 first to Arizona for Jakob Chychrun. Now, the reason why I add that first round pick is because, let's be real, you're trading the only NHL piece that you are trading to the Arizona Coyotes in this trade would be Warren Foegele, a guy who has had finishing issues, but a very solid NHLer. But again, that contract isn't very fantastic. Would be a little bit of a contract out situation. Wonder whether or not that would then force Arizona to maybe retain a little bit of salary. If they would do that, then on top of the first round pick, you could probably throw in a future third, fourth, whatever, if they do end up retaining some sort of salary. Because you have to remember, retaining of salary nowadays is an asset in itself in a trade, which means you're going to have to send assets in return for that asset retention as well. So Warren Foegele, Dimitri Samarukov, and a 2023 third. The thing about Dimitri Samarukov and why I add him in this deal, I've been a big proprietor or fan, I guess, of keeping Dimitri Samarukov and seeing what he can do. Got some minutes in the NHL this year. A guy who's NHL ready, a guy who's been in the professional game for the last couple of years. But I think Arizona would really benefit from a guy like Dimitri Samarukov because he could get big minutes in Arizona. I really, really think he could get very solid minutes and turn into a very solid defenseman if he could start in Arizona. I mean, he would get a lot more minutes in Arizona right now than he would in Edmonton right now. So I think he would benefit from a move like that. So the second deal for Jakob Chychrun, Warren Foegele, Dimitri Samarukov, and a 2023 first, barring any salary retention. If there is, then we would throw in an extra pick as well. The final trade offer for Jakob Chychrun would be Tyson Barrie, Raphael Lavoie, and a 2023 second round pick. Now, not necessarily the first, because the Edmonton Oilers are sending Tyson Barrie, who is a very solid asset. Then throwing in Raphael Lavoie, who's a solid prospect. I've been a big fan of Raphael Lavoie. It'll depend. The thing about Raphael Lavoie is whether or not his game from junior will be able to translate to the pro game. That has been my major thing over Lavoie for the last couple of years, is whether or not he can kind of bring that game and play that same type of game in the pros. And I think for a team that doesn't have a lot of pressure around them, like an Arizona Coyotes, where if he were to step in with the Edmonton Oilers, he would have to be a very productive third line, bottom six guy every single night. And the moment that he isn't, he's getting the Jesse Puljujärvi treatment. So I think if he were to go somewhere like Arizona, where it's not a lot of pressure, he could go out there, play hockey, get confident and understand playing the NHL game, another guy who could really benefit from playing out of Arizona. And finally, as well, that second round pick, like I mentioned, I don't want to send Tyson Barrie and a prospect and a first round pick for Jakob Chychrun. That's just way too much. So I'll just throw in a second round pick just as okay, here you go, here's the throw in type thing. Even maybe a third as well, just as long as it's not a first rounder in a move that also includes a prospect and Tyson Barrie, I'm fine with. But those are the three deals. The first one being Tyson Barrie, a 2023 first and a 2024 third for Jakob Chychrun. The second one being Warren Foegele, Dimitri Samarukov, and a 2023 first for Jakob Chychrun. And the third and final offer is Tyson Barrie, Raphael Lavoie, and a 2023 second round pick to the Arizona Coyotes for Jakob Chychrun. What do you think? Are those doable? Would you do them if you're Arizona? Would you do them if you're Edmonton? Who says no? Who says yes? Would you even trade for Jakob Chychrun? Now, this is where I put my quick opinion in there. Obviously, yesterday, as I mentioned, I don't think the Edmonton Oilers need another defenseman. So, for me, I wouldn't make the deal. But we're here to talk. We're here to speculate. And, hey, we're here to have fun. So, do you think the Edmonton Oilers should trade for Jakob Chychrun? Is it realistic? What would you do? I would like to know in the comments. And also, you can find me on Twitter as well, at Locked On Oilers, if you want to send it to the show Twitter, or personally, where I'll probably respond with a more personal answer, is at The Real Holden 40, which I think you can find right here anyways. Let's move on to my predictions for the week, because it is Friday, baby. It's Friday then. It's Saturday, Sunday. What? We will get into our predictions of the week in a second. But first, which NFL stars are making the betting lines move the most? Well, starting July 18th, which was on Monday, so you got a lot to catch up on, Locked On gives you the 50 most valuable players in the NFL from the odds makers over at BetOnline. Available from July 18th on Locked On NFL, wherever you find your podcasts and on YouTube. I mentioned, I think Aaron Donald will be, well, I mentioned Tom Brady. I think Aaron Donald should get a shout as well. But either way, NFL training camps start on Monday, I'm pretty sure. We're only like 48 days away from the NFL season. Are you an NFL fan? I know Edmonton, we got the CFL, but I know a lot of Edmontonians love their NFL. So let me know if you're an NFL fan. I'm a Chicago Bears fan, unfortunately. So I'm used to losing. I guess that's why I was also a 2010s Oilers fan. But either way, let's move on to our predictions for this week. And we will take a look at last week, as I take a look, we got all of them wrong. We got all of them wrong. Let's start off with last week. The first one that we got wrong was, yes, so Puljujarvi would re-sign with the Edmonton Oilers after that Connor Brown trade to Washington. Yes, so Puljujarvi's going to arbitration. So he might get re-signed to a bigger deal, or he might get traded again, just like we see with Matthew Tkachuk and his arbitration deal. But either way, we were wrong about Puljujarvi re-signing last week. Last week, we also predicted that the Edmonton Oilers would give us something fun to talk about, and that Sonny Milano would sign with the Edmonton Oilers. That also didn't happen. In fact, the Edmonton Oilers' last signing was on Sunday, and that was Mattias Janmark. So shout out to still the newest Oiler, Mattias Janmark. And finally, their third and final prediction from last week was Warren Foegele would get traded. We predicted that it was going to be a fun week this week, and boy, were we wrong. Warren Foegele didn't get moved. In fact, the Edmonton Oilers organization did nothing other than file for arbitration. Hey. So what do we think the Edmonton Oilers are going to do this week? Well, absolutely nothing. Our first prediction for next week, maybe it might be a little, reverse psychology. Our prediction for next week is that the Edmonton Oilers won't make a single move. They won't do a thing. Not a thing. Nothing. Right, Kenny? Insert Thierry Henry gif here. Right, Kenny? Do something, please. Our prediction is that Kenny won't do anything, wink, wink, next week. Please do something. Please let me be wrong on that. Let me be wrong and let it be fun. Anyways, the second thing that we think the Edmonton Oilers will do next week is, well, more of an Edmonton Oiler feel is, we think we're going to get a little Leon Draisaitl vacation post. How about we keep things light this week and keep our eyes on social media. Keep a watch out or keep an eye out for Leon Draisaitl's social media, and let me know if you see any vacation photos, because let's be real, that's all we're really on the watch for right now. And finally, the last thing that I predict for next week is Matthew Tkachuk will get traded. I'm sorry, I had to throw a stray. At the Calgary Flames. We didn't mention them once. Calgary Flames fans, I'm sorry. I had to. But yes, that will be the final prediction for us today. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. As I mentioned, it's Friday then. It's Saturday, Sunday. What? I'm pulling out my best Lando Norris. Says, hey, we got a race weekend as well if you're a big F1 fan there in France. Watching practice there, so make sure you listen to Lando and see if he does a little, it's Friday then, it's Saturday, Sunday, what? Anyways, thank you so much for making Locked On Oilers your first listen every day. Make sure for your second listen that you tune in to Locked On NHL, where Locked On experts give you a daily 30-minute podcast on all things NHL all year long. Stay up to date on everything in the hockey world. Locked On NHL, your daily 30-minute NHL podcast. Once again, I hope you have a wonderful Friday, a wonderful weekend. I hope you stay safe. I hope the weather is nice. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. Stay safe. Don't do anything I wouldn't do.